What is up, NBA fans? I am Jason Burgos for Sportsnaut, and I have the pleasure of being joined by one of my favorite guests. He covers the Lakers for Spectrum Sportsnet. He's a consistent voice on Fox Sports Radio, also writes for Sportskeeda, Sporting Tribune. Very busy man. He is here to talk the latest with the Lakers offseason, a lot of things going on with that, and just general news from around the NBA. Also, maybe a little bit of USA basketball, because we're getting that going soon. And that is the one and only Mark Medina, Senor Medina. Thank you so much for the time today.
Hey, thanks so much for the nice intro and the ability to talk hoops with you once again.
I mean, I'm just stating facts. You're doing a lot of big things. It's really impressive. I always like talking to you. So let's get right into it. You know, you're very much steeped in Lakers coverage on a weekly basis and throughout the year and stuff like that, along with other NBA stuff. So the Lakers were kind of, the assumption was going into the offseason that there was talk maybe they make a big move, something like that. There was rumors LeBron James was maybe recruiting Klay Thompson. That didn't work out. Now it looks like it might just be status quo for the team. Maybe there's an outside chance of like a Trey Young, Zack LaVine trade or something like that. Do you think maybe it's not a bad thing if they just keep the status quo of the team that just 2 years ago went to the Western Conference Finals, and maybe just having a different voice and a JJ Redick kind of leading this group makes a big difference?
It's not a bad thing, but it's not a great thing. I think when you look at everything, this is just geared up for the Lakers to be a playoff team that doesn't make a deep push. It doesn't help that the Western Conference just continues to get deeper and deeper. But when you look at the Lakers themselves, yes, there could be a net upgrade in the coaching staff. Even with JJ Redick's lack of experience, he has Nate McMillan and Scott Brooks on the bench. He's seen as someone that can manage a game a lot better than Darvin Ham and draw plays. Also relate to players from LeBron James onto the bottom of the roster better. But I think when you add that in, the best case scenario is that's just a nut upgrade and single digit wins. There's also a possibility that it's a regression just because of the fact that this is his first year as an NBA head coach. Then you look at the roster. This is mostly the same roster that had a lot of shortcomings last season. Now, the Lakers will counter, presume that Jared Vanderbilt and Gabe Vincent will be healthier this season than they were last season. Yeah. Okay, I'll give you that. But I think there is a danger in thinking that they're going to make dramatic differences. It will yield to improvement, but again, that's on the margins. Everything starts, obviously, with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and it is encouraging that they did play at a high level last season, but I think that it would be foolish for the Lakers to think that they're going to be at their absolute peak in availability just because they did that last season. LeBron James is turning 40 in December. Anthony Davis, yes, he has turned a corner in becoming a healthier version of himself, but you never know how long that will last. So with all these moving parts, I think that it's just going to be more of the same. A team that always has a fighting chance to make the playoffs or the play-in, but it's an uphill battle and just results in an early first-round exit.
I definitely have questions about possible ideas. What do you feel they can do roster-wise? But before we get to that, like I mentioned, you cover the team closely all the time. What are some of the things you may be hearing about why some in the organization are excited about JJ Redick as a coach? And does he have the potential to be like Steve Kerr? I think a lot of people will just compare him to Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr made a similar kind of jump from TV, not a lot of coaching experience, and that had a lot of success. Or maybe a lot of people will be hoping he's like Steve Kerr, a respected basketball mind, all those kinds of things. Like what are you hearing, from your own stuff and looking around and people talking about it in the business? Why should just Laker fans be excited about JJ Redick? What are some of the things they may not realize about how good he can be as a head coach without the experience?
Well, I'll take your comparison with Steve Kerr. I don't think that can happen, at least in the short term, because you have to look, it's much different circumstances. Steve Kerr was a former general manager with the Phoenix Suns, so he had a little bit more familiarity with how an organization is run. So I think that helped him hit the ground running in Golden State. I think the other thing that really helped hit the ground running, he inherited one of the best teams ever in NBA history with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, all in their prime, and then Kevin Durant comes 2 seasons later. JJ Redick is inheriting a team that has LeBron James still playing at all-star caliber level, but is on the tail end of his career. Anthony Davis playing at all-star caliber level, but you never know if his durability will last. And a supporting cast that is a supporting cast for a reason. Intriguing role players, but they're role players because they're inconsistent. So it's apples to oranges with that. But so I think your broader point, why the Lakers are high on JJ Redick and why Laker fans could be enthusiastic about him, is that the inevitable learning curve that he has as an inexperienced NBA head coach, he can overcome that with a few qualities. He's obviously a former player. He knows the game. He has also a lot of relationships built in, not just with LeBron James, but with Austin Reeves, other players that he's interviewed on his podcast, as well as just his ability to relate to both star players and role players. I think that his work ethic is maniacal. He is someone that is always obsessed with perfecting his craft, but he also knows how to work smarter, not just harder. So even though he is a grinder, it also comes from being innovative. And I think with all those qualities, he's going to be a good head coach. But I think in the short term, it's going to be a challenge because it's always a challenge your first year as head coach. And here with the Lakers, there's so many dueling priorities that the Lakers will readily admit they're trying to succeed, but easier said than done. Maximize LeBron James' final years, try to make Anthony Davis become the focal point of the franchise, really hone in on player development. Oh yeah, they're the Lakers, still have a chance to try to contend for a championship.
Yeah.
All those ideals are great, but at some point something has to give, and that's going to be tough to accomplish all those things.
And you hear it a lot with JJ about relating to the players. And, take Lakers fans and people who watch this to the learning tree, because your experience covering the sport, covering this team. Why is that such a big deal? Because I think a lot of fans, especially old school fans, like, look, they're players, they're getting paid a lot of money. This is a coach, this is kind of a job, do the best you can at a job. But it's a very different time than it was 80s, 90s, and even further back. Why is this so important to relate? And why being a younger coach, even not just basketball, it's happening to other sports, is such a big deal now more than ever? Like, where was the disconnect, do you feel, for Darvin Ham with this group, where JJ, being younger, close to sport, played against some of these guys on this team? It makes such a big difference to interact, almost be a friend as well as a coach.
Yeah, well, with Darvin Ham, I think the broader shortcomings are the roster construction and the injuries. But I think that the one knock on Darvin Ham, as great as he is with his personality and how he relates to people, he has a lot of good social skills. His X's and O's savviness is still something left to be desired. So that's really where the Lakers took some issue with him, where they felt like he wasn't managing games well, drawing up plays well, making adjustments well. I think when you're looking at coaching, that is an important thing. But I think the broader point is how to manage a group. And I think, ironically, Darvin did a great job his first season in doing that, but I think that quality wasn't as valuable his second season, partly because people in the organization didn't feel he was fully prepared, but as how he handled overlapping rotations and lineups, it didn't seem to make sense to people in the organization because they had devoted so much more of their resources with having Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and D'Angelo Russell. And if all of those players are facing evolving roles, it kind of sends a mixed message on what the priorities are. So with JJ Redick, to be clear, it's not about being anyone's friend. Even if you are someone who's a contemporary, there has to be a little bit of a difference between being a friend, being a coach. He can't be someone who's, going out with them, on off nights, whatever. But I think that as long as you're connected to the game and you know your stuff and you're willing to make adjustments and have open conversations, that can go a long way in today's NBA. But he has to, as much as he has to be flexible with all those things, he also has to have strong conviction so he shows that he is the one in charge. But it is a fine line, and I think that one of the things that he'll have to establish early on in the Lakers locker room is he's not just LeBron James's podcast partner, right? He is someone that's going to coach LeBron objectively for better and for worse, and also treat the rest of the roster the same. You can't treat every player the same equally as your star player because every player's value is different. But just as far as how you manage that player, putting them in positions to succeed, figuring out rotations and adjustments. And when you look at the history of the NBA, former NBA players who never were head coaches, there's frankly a mixed bag. I mean, some people have succeeded.
Yeah.
Steve Kerr is a notable example, but there's also a number of accomplished former NBA players that struggle with that. Derek Fisher, Steve Nash, Jason Kidd is now a successful head coach, but he went through a learning curve like that himself. So it is a good quality for JJ Redick to have, but obviously it's too early to know to what extent that could be seen as an asset or a liability.
There were rumors that LeBron did not have the same influence some people assumed in the hiring of JJ Redick, and that there was also talk maybe Anthony Davis had more of a say than some might have expected. He was consulted him a little bit more. More than ever, does this really feel, because it's been the thing that's been talked about for the last couple of seasons, even LeBron said that this is now really Anthony Davis's team, and as part of like this new JJ Redick regime, his job to make him the focal point of the team. And if that's the plan, which it should be, how does he do that?
Yeah, well, there's a few things to unpack here. The Lakers, when they talk about LeBron James's lack of involvement with the coaching search, they're speaking as if it's letters to the law. So I think technically it is accurate when they say LeBron James wasn't heavily involved because he didn't talk with JJ Redick during the coaching search, didn't talk to the front office during the coaching search. But a lot of times, NBA superstars and powerful people in general can exert their influence just by their mere presence. And so the Lakers were very well aware how LeBron James felt about JJ Redick's hire because he has a relationship with him. They've been on a podcast. So they're not making decisions in a vacuum. I think obviously you extend that to Bronny James. Obviously they know how LeBron feels about that. He has put that out in the universe in regards to wanting to play with his son. But I think when you look at the track record, it's always about what they say or what they do, not what they say. And I think that it is a stretch for people to conclude that LeBron is running the Lakers organization. When you look at roster moves they have or have not made in the summer and leading to the trade deadline, the Lakers, since the Russell Westbrook trade, have basically gone against LeBron James's wishes of putting all their chips in to make moves, even draft picks be damned. Last summer of 2023, they did not pursue Kyrie Irving, even though LeBron James wanted him. So I think when you look at the big picture with everything that's played out, the dynamic between LeBron James and the Lakers is a normal give and take that most organizations have with a star player, where they'll always listen to their star player. The star player will sometimes interject, sometimes stay on the sideline, and the moves that they make sometimes reflects what the superstar wants and sometimes doesn't. So for better and for worse, any moves the Lakers have made or haven't made when it comes to the coaching search and the roster construction, it starts and ends with the front office.
And when it comes to Anthony Davis, how does JJ make him like the focal point of things? Like, because that seems to be the strategy for a couple of years, but maybe it's not all the way there yet.
Yeah, well, JJ Redick talked in his press conference about making Anthony Davis more of a hub, and I think what that means is it's about tapping into his versatile skill set with being both a really good post player, but being a good pick and pop, even perimeter shooter. Now, I think this also falls into watch what they do, not what they say. Ever since LeBron James joined the Lakers, he had proclaimed that he wants Anthony Davis to be the focal point. And I think that X's and O's wise, we've seen Anthony Davis be that person. I think what's complicated that is a few things. Up until last season, Anthony Davis wasn't consistently healthy. Number two, LeBron James is always willing to be the passer and doesn't have to be scoring the ball, but it's his locker room because it's LeBron James. He has leadership qualities, and it's just in his instincts for his alpha male personality to shine through. And I think the other thing is in relation to Russell Westbrook and really anyone else, they didn't have definitive playmakers, and he felt because he's LeBron James that he should be the one overseeing that. But I think at least from a workload standpoint, given where LeBron James is at in his career, I think all parties are trying to reduce that. But
Yeah.
to be frank, this is a conversation they had last year. You may recall
Yeah.
Darvin Ham talking
Yep.
generally about limiting LeBron's minutes to open the season, and then that went out the window after
Yeah.
the first game because LeBron wanted to play more. So
Yep.
we'll see what happens. Sometimes a new head coach brings in some new ideas. Sometimes they reinforce existing ideas that wind up working only because it's a new voice. So regardless, it'll be very intriguing to watch.
All right, last question on the Lakers. The Lakers have, like I mentioned before, they've been linked in trade talks for the last few months, last 6 months, with guys like Zach LaVine, Trey Young, DeJounte Murray's off the block now. That was another person that they were supposedly rumored to be interested in. But both of those players have seemingly, based on rumors, if you believe them or not, they've lost some value around the league. They may not come as expensive as in a trade, which is beneficial for the Lakers. Of those two, based on how they have performed recently in recent years, stuff like that, who really is the best fit for this Lakers team, especially now with Redick as coach? Or maybe there's somebody else, a different name that's been rumored in trades that might be a better fit that the Lakers should target.
Yeah, well, I think there's a few things with Zach LaVine and Trey Young. They would be great fits with the Lakers, a net upgrade, but it also comes with some question marks. Neither player are as great defenders. There's also injury concerns about Zach LaVine. But on the positive end, Zach LaVine is a gamer. He's a great scorer. When you look at the fact that there's been a lot of struggles that he's had with his teams in recent seasons.
Yeah.
A lot of that has had to do with the teams themselves than him. I think with Trey Young, he's a great scorer, playmaker. But I think the other challenging part is that the Lakers generally have concluded that with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, they are willing to get a third star so long as it doesn't seriously compromise their roster depth.
Right.
And so that's where there's been sources of friction, and not sources of friction, but challenges in pulling deals off, because they don't want to gut their roster and just have 3 players and then the rest of the rosters on veteran minimum deals. But when you look at the Lakers roster, outside of Austin Reeves, there's not much of a market and demand for a lot of those players, hence why it's been so difficult to make some of these deals. Now, there could be an opportunity with those 2 players specifically, because Zach LaVine's market's gone down because of his injury concerns. Trey Young's market's gone down because of the concern on whether his presence, even though it's always good, can contribute to consistent winning basketball. So it would be good deals, but it's really going to be a matter of how many of those 3 Laker draft picks do they give up, and how many role players do they give up. And that's been the challenging part overall when you're looking at free agency in general. Klay Thompson and James Harden, DeMar DeRozan, they just didn't have those kind of assets to pull off those deals. And hence, really, their only mechanism with signing those players was through their mid-level. But with it being $12 million, that's really hard to convince players of those caliber to sign on board, especially when there's so many questions about the Lakers roster to begin with heading into next season.
So, of course, I've got to ask the Knicks question. I don't live in New York anymore, but I'm going to be a Knicks guy until the day I die. They've had a pretty good offseason so far. They re-signed OG Anunoby, which I'm thrilled about. Give him a blockbuster deal. They get Mikal Bridges, another huge deal. They're kind of going with this strategy, reportedly, of just bolstering their wings and their defense there to pretty much compete with the Celtics, which it's a sound idea. I like it. What do you think of this strategy, kind of, setting up a squad that can really counter Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum? And do you think they're the biggest threat to the Celtics now in the East? Why or why not?
Yeah, I've been mostly positive on the Knicks. I think that they've shown in recent seasons they're no longer the dysfunctional Knicks. It's about having roster depth and continuity, not trying to carve out cap space to throw money at the next possible free agent or player that could be traded. So it's great that they were able to retain OG Anunoby. He's a great two-way player, great competitor. Getting Mikal Bridges, even though they dealt a lot of first-round picks, he is someone who's worth the price of that. He is not a number one option as the Brooklyn Nets experienced last season, but he is what you want in a championship caliber team. Great two-way player, plays the right way, defends the opposing team's best player on a consistent basis, doesn't need plays drawn up for him. He's the ultimate Iron Man with his consecutive games played streak, and he has a lot of familiarity with all the Villanova players, with Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo. Now, it is a huge loss. The Knicks weren't able to keep Isaiah Hartenstein going to Oklahoma City. Great rebounder, great defender. The Thunder had a lot more cap space for the Knicks, and so he took an offer that was just too hard to pass up, especially because the Thunder have been a really good team this past season. But I think that aside, the Knicks have done a good job, and I am of the belief that they're better off keeping Julius Randle than trying to see if they can dangle him in a trade, because even though he had some injury concerns, I'm optimistic he's going to be healthier next season, and I think that he really helps fuel the kind of identity that the Knicks have had. It starts with Jalen Brunson. It continues with Tom Thibodeau's coaching style, but I think Julius Randle provides those perfect qualities to complement what Jalen Brunson brings on the court, as well as complements what Tibbs is looking for in a player. Now, to your question, where does this mean in the Eastern Conference rankings? The Boston Celtics still have a lot of separation. They're defending champs. They have their same roster back, and they have just so much depth, continuity. Their main core guys are in their prime. So they're the clear number one. As far as the number two goes, I think on paper the Sixers have the edge because they got Paul George. They have a big three. I think the fit is really great. Joel Embiid, versatile big. Tyrese Maxey showed that he could take on an elevated playmaking and scoring role. And Paul George is very adaptable as a 1-2 third option. But there's always the questions about Joel Embiid and Paul George, and can they stay healthy? Their track record has said otherwise. And so with that, there is a very realistic pathway that the Knicks are the number two contender in the Eastern Conference.
I mean, and that's where I was going to go. And you pretty much answered the question on Paul George, because there's those fears about his injury, stuff like that, and then Joel. So I'll just move on to the next question, which was, besides the Knicks, and maybe even besides the 76ers, is there any team, do you feel, this offseason they had a really good offseason? Maybe in the draft, what they did in the draft, maybe the free, maybe it's the Spurs getting a Chris Paul, maybe it's the Mavericks adding a Klay Thompson. Do you feel there's some team that maybe not getting enough love for some really good stuff they've done so far this summer?
Well, I think they've gotten love, but in light of this conversation, the Thunder did really well getting Hartenstein, drafting Nikola Topic, even though he's not going to play his rookie season because of his ACL injury. I've talked to people around the league that think that he is the best pure point guard in the draft. He has a lot of good scoring, passing instincts, and think of what missing their rookie season did for Chet Holmgren. He was able to watch from the sideline, be around good players, and he hit the ground running his second season. I think the same thing will happen with Nikola with the Thunder. And they just have such a well-oiled machine here now. With Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, two-way player, great leader, floor general, gets to the rim, gets the foul line, can shoot threes. Lou Dort, I think one of the most physical defenders, can fight through screens. We mentioned Hartenstein. He really, I think, addresses one of the Thunder's weaknesses last season with improving the rebounding presence. And then you look at players like Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams. They can provide additional scoring punch, and because of the fact that they have Chet and Hartenstein, they can play big, but they can also stagger them and play small. So they're, I think, the leaders and the favorites to get out of the Western Conference. But the Dallas Mavericks did a really good job with obviously getting Klay Thompson. I think that it might be wishful thinking, even though when I talked with Michael Thompson, he was bullish on it, that he could be the Klay Thompson pre-2019 injuries, but I think that he is going to have a bounce back season, and especially on the offensive end, because Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving are going to get so much attention. Klay Thompson is going to have so many catch and look opportunities. He thrives in that. He might not be the same defender he's not the same defender as he once was. But the Mavericks have a good supporting cast, and he can at least defend wing players as opposed to backcourt players. So I would put Dallas at number two in the Western Conference.
Now, on the flip side, is there, we're just still a few weeks into the offseason. There's a lot of things can happen, especially when it comes to trade. But is there teams that you feel like, man, they really missed opportunities. They didn't do and make the improvements they needed to in the draft or free agent. Like Detroit had the most money. No one really wanted to go there. They signed Tobias Harris, which is, I'm sure, not thrilling Pistons fans. The Magic, there was a lot of, I know a lot of people like Caldwell Pope in that move, but they was talking about Klay Thompson or maybe even a Paul George. They didn't get that big splash that some maybe they were hoping for. Maybe it's the Rockets. The Rockets, talk about them making some big trades and adding another big player to their team. Do you feel, is there a team that's kind of disappointed thus far in the offseason?
Well, I think it's all about the expectations, and you can't help but think the Lakers were the most disappointing because they didn't make any moves at all in free agency besides retaining Max Christie. Great move that they did. He's a young talent, and I think that with JJ Redick, he'll get more playing time than he did last season. I'm fine with the draft, with getting Dalton Connect. He was a good steal. Bronny James, I know there's a lot of scrutiny on him, obviously, because of his dad, but he's a 55th pick. I don't think he's expected to play much.
Yeah.
But I do understand why the Lakers weren't able to get players, and it wasn't a lack for trying, but I think it really illustrated the fact that there's a lot of question marks on the team's supporting cast. If there weren't, they would have been able to make a lot more trades. And I think that with Rob Pelinka's messaging that the second apron is going to be challenging and that he might be waiting to make a deal with those picks until next year's trade deadline in February, I think that really sends a message that this is the team they have to work with, but we've already seen a sample size that can only go so far. And so even though there's all these qualifiers, well, Gabe Vincent and Jared Vanderbilt can become healthier. You never bet against LeBron James, Anthony Davis. JJ Redick could be a net upgrade. There's also possibilities that there's, regressions with all those three entities with Vincent and Vanderbilt still having injury concerns, LeBron and AD not being able to sustain their play because of their own injuries, and JJ Redick, at least in the short term, having some learning curves as a first-year head coach before showing his true value and potential.
All right, last question. You are out there in Las Vegas covering the practices and the preparation for USA basketball as they get ready for the Summer Olympics at the end of the month. What's the experience been like? It's a unique thing. It's the cream of the crop of the NBA. It's the all-star game of all-star games. The best. It's a unique group. There's been a lot of buzz actually about Cooper Flagg, the Duke player. That's a lot of people were impressed by him on the practice team the team is going against. What's it been like, and what's the interesting buzz you're hearing about this team heading into this year's Olympics?
No, it's been fun. You mentioned about Cooper Flagg. It was really cool to see him up close, really take over at the end of the scrimmage. I mean, he made a shot over Drew Holiday, a three, crashed the glass for an and one off a putback. He was almost going to win the game for the select team until Anthony Davis blocked his shot. But there was a lot of buzz about how well Cooper Flagg, played. He just had a lot of good composure, showed a lot of good skills with his shooting and ball handling and aggressiveness. And the Olympic team really embraced him, I think, for two reasons. One, they felt like, he came to work, came to perform, and, really did what young players are expected to do with show your work ethic and potential, but don't be demonstrative about it. And then third, the Olympic team wants the select team to challenge them to get ready for their exhibition game against Canada on Wednesday and just the broader Olympics. So it's about threading that needle, challenging them with competitive scrimmages and drills and practices, but not getting any of the players hurt. And the select team did a good job of that. Now, to your broader point about Team USA, it's been cool to see. There's been inevitable comparisons to the 1992 Dream Team, and I guess that happens during every Olympics.
Yeah.
But I think that can actually be a valid case here because you have the NBA's all-time leading scorer, LeBron James. You have the NBA's best shooter ever in Steph Curry. You have one of the most efficient scorers ever in Kevin Durant. Now, he has missed practices because of a calf strain, but Steve Kerr says it's day-to-day, it's mild. But when you look at the talent, they have a very interesting blend of experienced players and young and up-and-coming players. But when you really dive into the intricacies, there's a lot of freshness with this group. Kevin Durant is really the lone player that has been there, done that in consecutive Olympic games since 2012. Obviously, this isn't LeBron James's first rodeo, but he hasn't played since 2012. He didn't play in 2016 with all those finals appearances against Golden State. Didn't play in Tokyo in 2021 because the Lakers played the bubble in 2020 and then the compressed season. He needed to reset his batteries. Steph Curry hasn't played in the Olympics until now. Didn't even make the team in 2012. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He opted not to participate in 2016, some injury concerns. Didn't play in Tokyo, I think just wanting to recharge for similar reasons that LeBron did because of the pandemic. So this is his first Olympics. But then when you look at the rest of the group, there's just a lot of good, young, and up-and-coming talent. You know, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton.
Yep.
I mean, it's weird to say Jason Tatum, young, up-and-coming talent. He's kind of in the prime of it. He's already won a gold medal in Tokyo. So there's that young up-and-comer, some of the players that are in their prime that have some experience, including Devin Booker, Drew Holiday, and then some of those OG players. So a lot of good combinations of each player's path to the Olympics, as well as their obvious skill level and experience.